The grand chamber was the largest room in the known galaxy. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Thousands of seats filled the curved walls, each one holding a delegate from a different world. Light from a dozen captured stars floated in crystal spheres above, casting everything in a golden glow. Ambassador Tae-ho Shin stood alone in the center of the floor. He was a small figure in that massive space. His gray suit was simple compared to the robes and armor worn by the alien delegates around him, but his back was straight, and his voice was steady. 47 years, he said. The translation systems carried his words to every ear in the chamber. For 47 years, humanity has served this council. He pressed a button on his datapad. A hologram appeared in the air above him. It showed human soldiers fighting alongside alien troops, human doctors treating wounded aliens, human ships carrying food to starving colonies. We have given our blood, Tae-ho continued. We have given our knowledge. We have given our resources. We asked for nothing in return except one thing. He paused. Respect. High Arbiter Vel sat on his throne at the head of the chamber. He was tall and thin, with silver scales covering his body. His eyes were cold and yellow. He had led the council for over 200 years, and he had never liked the humans. They were too young, too small, too proud for such a weak species. We come before you today, Tae-ho said, to request a permanent seat on the High Arbiter's circle. We believe we have earned this right. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, Vel began to laugh. It was a low, hissing sound that echoed off the walls. Other delegates joined in. Soon, half the chamber was laughing at the small human standing alone on the floor. Tae-ho did not move. He did not look away. He simply waited. Vel raised one clawed hand, and the laughter stopped. He leaned forward on his throne, looking down at Tae-ho like a man looking at an insect. Ambassador Shin, Vel said, your species learned to make fire only a few thousand years ago. My people built empires when yours still lived in caves. The Turani were sailing between stars before your ancestors learned to walk upright. He smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. You want a seat among the great powers of the galaxy? Come back in 10,000 years. Perhaps then, you will have earned that right. More laughter filled the chamber. Some delegates pounded on their seats in amusement. In the human section of the chamber, Captain Yuna Park sat with her hands folded in her lap. Her face showed nothing, but her eyes were fixed on Tae-ho. Waiting, Tae-ho looked at the High Arbiter. He looked at the laughing delegates. He thought about his father, who had stood in this same chamber 30 years ago and begged for fair treatment. He thought about the human soldiers who had died defending council worlds from raiders. He thought about the doctors who had worked without sleep to cure alien plagues. He thought about all the years of service, all the sacrifice, all the hope, and then he closed his datapad. I see, Tae-ho said quietly. His voice was calm. There was no anger in it, no sadness, nothing at all. Then we have nothing more to discuss. The laughter began to fade. Something in his tone made the delegates uneasy. Tae-ho turned and walked toward the exit. He did not hurry. He did not look back. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Yuna stood. So did the rest of the human delegation. 30 men and women in simple gray suits. They fell into step behind their ambassador without a word. Counselor Rix, a large being with blue skin and 4 arms, leaned forward in his seat. He had always respected the humans. He had fought beside them in the border wars. He watched them go with a feeling of dread growing in his chest. The doors of the grand chamber were 20 meters tall. They were made of solid gold and covered with carvings showing the history of the council. They had never been closed during a session. The humans walked through them in perfect silence. Not one of them spoke. Not one of them looked back. The doors closed behind them with a soft hiss. For a long moment, no one in the chamber moved. The laughter was gone now. Something felt wrong. Something felt final. Elder Oren was the oldest member of the council. He had been alive for over 3,000 years. His body was small and wrinkled, but his mind was still sharp. He had watched the humans since they first came to the stars, and he had always known they were different. You should not have done that, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the chamber. Vel turned to look at him. What? Put them in their place? They forget who built this council. No, Oren said. You forget who kept it running. He shook his head slowly. You have made a terrible mistake, Arbiter, and I fear we will all pay for it. Vel laughed again, but there was less confidence in it now. What will they do? Declare war? Their fleet is 1/10 the size of ours. They need our trade routes, our technology, our protection. They will be back within a month, begging for readmission. Will they? Oren looked toward the closed doors. I have studied humans for a long time. They are not like us. When they are angry, they do not shout. When they are hurt, they do not cry. They simply go quiet. He turned back to face the Arbiter. And when humans go quiet, Arbiter, that is when you should be afraid. Outside the Grand Chamber, the human delegation walked through the corridors of Station Prime. Other aliens stepped aside to let them pass. Something in the humans' eyes made them nervous. Yuna fell into step beside Tejo. It's done. Then, she said softly. Tejo nodded. It's done. Signal the fleet. We're leaving. The council will not believe we're serious. No, Tejo agreed. They won't. Not until it's too late. They reached the docking bay where their shuttle waited. The rest of the delegation filed aboard in silence. Yuna paused at the door and looked back at the great station behind them. 47 years, she said. My grandmother was on the first delegation. She believed so strongly that we could be friends, that we could be equals. Tejo put a hand on her shoulder. We gave them every chance. Yuna, every single chance. They made their choice. Now we make ours. Yuna nodded slowly. Then she stepped aboard the shuttle, and the door closed behind her. An hour later, the human fleet departed from Station Prime. 50 ships, moving in perfect formation. They did not request clearance. They did not respond to hails. They simply turned toward human space and began to accelerate. In the Grand Chamber, Vel watched them go on the main display screen. He smiled and shook his head. Children throwing a tantrum, he said. They will learn. But Elder Oren sat in silence, watching the ships disappear into the darkness between stars. And in his ancient heart, he felt the first cold touch of fear. The humans had walked away, and they had done it in utter silence. 3 months passed. The galaxy continued to turn. Stars burned, ships flew. Life went on. High Arbiter Vel held his weekly address to the Council with the same confidence as always. When asked about the humans, he waved his clawed hand dismissively. They are sulking, he said, like children who did not get their way. Give them time. The cold of isolation will cool their pride. They will return before the year is out, and they will be grateful we allow them back at all. The delegates laughed. Some of them even believed it. Trade Minister Losa did not laugh. She was a small creature with large dark eyes and quick, nervous movements. Her people, the Nuri, had built the greatest trade network in the galaxy. They understood numbers better than anyone, and the numbers were beginning to worry her. She sat in her office on Station Prime, staring at reports that made no sense. Medical supplies from the human pharmaceutical companies had stopped arriving. The shipments simply ended one day without warning. No explanation, no negotiation, just silence. Lossa sent messages to the human trade offices. There was no response. She sent messages to the human embassy. It was empty. She even tried to contact human merchants directly. Nothing. It was like shouting into a void. At first, she thought it was a mistake. Then she thought it was a negotiating tactic. Now, 3 months later, she was beginning to understand the truth. The humans were not bargaining. They were not making demands. They had simply stopped. On the agricultural world of Veth Prime, farmers stared at their dying fields. The irrigation systems had been designed by human engineers. Without regular maintenance from human technicians, the machines were breaking down one by one. The Veth had never bothered to learn how the systems worked. Why would they? The humans had always been there to fix them. Now the humans were gone, and the crops were dying. The Turani military faced a similar problem. Their standard rifles used ammunition manufactured in human factories. The ammunition was cheap, reliable, and plentiful. It was also no longer available. Torani officers sent urgent requests to their government, asking what they should do. The government had no answer. On the human colony world of New Busan, life was peaceful. The streets were clean. The markets were full. Children played in the parks while their parents went about their daily work. Dr. Hana Cho stood in her laboratory, overseeing the final phase of the transition. Every piece of council-licensed technology was being replaced with human alternatives. It had taken years of secret preparation, but now it was almost complete. The last of the council communication systems are offline. Her assistant reported. We are now fully independent. Hana nodded. Good. And the new trade routes? Established with 12 non-council worlds. More are expressing interest every day. Hana allowed herself a small smile. The council had always believed that humanity needed them. They had never stopped to consider that maybe, just maybe, it was the other way around. Admiral Minho Kang stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dawn. Through the view screen, he could see the new border of human space. A line of defense stations stretched across the darkness, each one armed and ready. Any movement from council ships? He asked. None, Admiral. They do not seem to understand that we are serious. Minho clasped his hands behind his back. They will. Eventually. But by then, it will be too late. He had spent his entire career defending council worlds from raiders and pirates. He had lost good soldiers protecting aliens, who called them primitive behind their backs. He had attended too many funerals, shaken too many grieving hands, folded too many flags. No more. From now on, human soldiers would only die for human causes. Counselor Rix could not sleep. He lay in his quarters on Station Prime, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Captain Yuna Park. He had fought beside her in the border wars. She had saved his life twice. They were friends, or so he had believed. He had tried to contact her. No response. He had tried to contact Taeho Shin. No response. He had tried every channel he knew, called in every favor, used every connection. Nothing but silence. Finally, he made a decision. He took his personal ship and flew to the human border. Alone, unauthorized. It was either very brave or very foolish. The human patrol found him within an hour. They escorted him to Yuna's flagship without a word. He was brought to her ready room and told to wait. When she entered, Rick stood quickly. Yuna. Thank you for seeing me. She sat behind her desk, her face calm and unreadable. You should not have come, Rix. The council will not be pleased. I do not care about the council right now. He leaned forward. I care about you. About all of you. This is not the answer. Come back. I will advocate for you. I will speak to the High Arbiter myself. We can fix this. Yuna was silent for a long moment. Then she shook her head slowly. You had 47 years to advocate for us, Rix. 47 years. And in all that time, what did you do? You sat in your seat and said nothing while they laughed at us. You shook our hands in private and pretended not to know us in public. Rix flinched. I know. I was a coward. But things can change. Give us another chance. No. Yuna's voice was soft but final. We gave the council every chance. We gave them our loyalty, our labor, our lives, and they gave us nothing but contempt. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. We are done asking, Rix. We are done begging. We are done hoping that someday, if we work hard enough and sacrifice enough, they will finally see us as equals. Then what do you want? Rix asked desperately. Yuna turned to face him. Nothing. That is what they do not understand. We do not want anything from the council anymore. Not their recognition. Not their trade. Not their approval. Nothing. You cannot survive alone. We are not alone. A faint smile crossed her face. We are with each other. And that is enough. Rix left the next day. He returned to Station Prime with a heavy heart and a growing fear. He had seen something in Yuna's eyes that he did not understand. A kind of peace. A kind of certainty. The humans were not angry. They were not bitter. They had simply let go. And that, Rix realized, was the most terrifying thing of all. Meanwhile, on Station Prime, The first real crisis was beginning. A council hospital ran out of a critical medication. The medicine was used to treat a common blood disease that affected 3 different species. Without it, patients would die within weeks. Trade Minister Lhasa worked frantically to find an alternative supplier. There was none. The humans had been the only ones who manufactured the drug. They had created it 40 years ago and shared it freely with the council. Now they had stopped sharing. There must be something we can do, Vel said in an emergency meeting. Offer them money, offer them territory, whatever they want. They do not respond to our offers, Lhasa said quietly. They do not respond to anything. Every message we send. Nothing. Just silence. Vel slammed his fist on the table. Then we will take what we need. Send a fleet to their territory. Make them understand. Elder Oren spoke for the first time. And if they resist? Are you prepared for war with humanity? Vel sneered. They are weak. We would crush them in days, would we? Oren shook his head. I wonder. They have been preparing for this moment for a long time, perhaps longer than any of us realized. They knew this day would come. They were ready. He looked around the table at the frightened faces of the other council members. We were not. On Earth, Tehoshin sat in his apartment, looking out at the night sky. For the first time in decades, he felt at peace. No more meetings, no more speeches, no more begging for scraps of respect from beings who saw him as less than an insect. His communication device was turned off. He did not want to hear whatever the council had to say. The silence was perfect, and in that silence, he could finally rest. 8 months after the humans walked away, the cracks in the council began to show. It started small. A trade route delayed here. A supply shortage there. Problems that could be explained away, blamed on bad luck or temporary setbacks. But the problems did not stop. They grew worse. And soon, everyone began to understand the truth. The council was falling apart. Warlord Kren sat in his command throne on the bridge of his massive warship. He was a Morax, a species of warriors who lived for battle and glory. For 30 years, his raids had been contained by the council's military power. Human ships had patrolled the borders. Human soldiers had defended the vulnerable colonies. Human strategists had predicted his attacks before he could launch them. Now the humans were gone. And Kren smiled. Launch all fighters, he ordered. Today, we take back what is ours. His fleet poured across the border into council space. There was no resistance. The Torani ships that should have been patrolling were nowhere to be found. They had run out of ammunition weeks ago and were sitting useless in their docks. The first colony fell in 3 hours. The second fell in 2. By the end of the week, Kren had conquered more territory than his ancestors had taken in a century. On Station Prime, the council met in emergency session. The Grand Chamber, once filled with thousands of delegates, was now half empty. Many species had recalled their representatives, afraid of what was coming. Trade Minister Lhasa delivered her report with shaking hands. Our economic projections show complete collapse within 2 years. Possibly sooner. We are losing trade partners every day. The non-council worlds are refusing to deal with us, they say. She hesitated. Say it, Vel growled. They say they prefer to work with the humans. Human trade terms are fair. Human merchants are honest. Human promises are kept. She looked down at her datapad. They do not trust us. The chamber erupted in angry shouts. Delegates blamed each other. They blamed the humans. They blamed everyone except themselves. Elder Oren sat in silence, watching the chaos. He had warned them. They had not listened. The jump gates were the next crisis. The council's entire transportation network depended on these massive structures. They allowed ships to travel between star systems in moments instead of years, and they were designed by human engineers. The gates required regular maintenance, complex calculations, precise adjustments, delicate repairs. For decades, human technicians had handled all of it. They had asked for nothing in return except fair treatment. Now 3 major gates failed in the same month. Ships were stranded. Supplies could not reach their destinations. The carefully balanced network that connected hundreds of worlds began to fall apart. Vel sent his most trusted advisor to the human border. The advisor carried a message of negotiation. A promise of better treatment, an offer of compromise. The human patrol ship that intercepted him was commanded by Commander Jiho Baek. He was a patient man, known for his calm demeanor even in the heat of battle. He read the Council's message without expression. "Tell the High Arbiter this," Jiho said. "Humanity has no business with the Galactic Council at this time. Please turn your ship around and return to Council space." "But the message," the advisor began, "has been received," Jiho finished, "and our response has been given. That is all." The advisor tried to argue. He tried to negotiate. He offered bribes, threatened consequences, appealed to mercy and reason and self-interest. Jiho simply repeated his response, word for word, again and again. Until finally, the advisor gave up and left. On the Torani homeworld, Councillor Rick stood before his government and begged for action. "We must help ourselves," he said. "We cannot wait for the Council to save us. They are too slow, too divided, too weak." "What would you have us do?" the Torani Emperor asked. "We do not have the knowledge to maintain our own technology. We do not have the medicine to heal our sick. We do not have the ammunition to fight our wars. We have depended on others for too long." "Then we must learn," Rick said. "We must become self-sufficient. The humans did it. They spent decades building their independence. We can do the same." "Decades?" The Emperor laughed bitterly. "We do not have decades. The Moraks are at our borders now. Our colonies are burning. Our people are dying." He shook his head. "We do not have time to learn. We barely have time to survive." The Council sent 3 more diplomatic envoys to human space. Each one was received politely at the border. Each one was given the same message. Each one returned empty-handed. The 3rd envoy was young, barely out of training. She stood before the human border station and wept openly. "Please," she said, "just tell us what you want. Anything. We will give you anything. Just stop this silence. Talk to us. Negotiate with us. Something. Anything." Captain Yuna Park received the message on her flagship. She read it 3 times. Then she dictated her response. "We wanted respect. You had 47 years to give it. Now we want nothing." The young envoy received the message. She read it once. Then she sat down on the floor of her ship and cried until she had no tears left. On New Busan, Dr. Hanacho reviewed the latest reports from Council space. The hospital crisis was spreading. The Moraks raids were intensifying. The economy was in free fall. Millions of innocent civilians were suffering. She brought the reports to Taeho Shin. He read them in silence, his face revealing nothing. "We could help them," Hana said quietly. "We still have the knowledge, the medicine, the technology. We could save millions of lives." Taeho set down the reports. "Yes, we could. And if we did, what would happen? The Council would accept our help gratefully. They would promise to change. They would give us speeches about unity and cooperation and a new beginning." He looked at her. "And then, when the crisis was over, they would go back to treating us exactly as they did before. They would laugh at us in the Grand Chamber. They would deny us a voice. They would take our gifts and give us nothing but contempt in return." Hana was silent. "We cannot save them from themselves," Taeho continued. "We tried. For 47 years, we tried. And they never changed. They never even tried to change." He stood and walked to the window. "The only way they will learn is if they suffer the consequences of their choices. It is cruel. I know, it is cruel. But it is also true. And if they do not survive," Taeho closed his eyes, "then they do not survive. We cannot make them respect us. We can only make them understand what they lost when they refused to." On Earth, Commander Jiho Baek trained new recruits. The training was rigorous but fair. Every soldier learned the same lesson. "We do not fight for glory," Jiho told them. "We do not fight for conquest. We fight for each other. For our families. For our homes. Never again will we die for those who despise us. Never again will we bleed for those who laugh at our sacrifice." The recruits listened in silence. They understood. They had all heard the stories. The years of service. The years of contempt. The final insult in the Grand Chamber, they would never forget. And they would make sure the galaxy never forgot either. The silence continued. 8 months, 9 months, 10, and with each passing day, the Council paid a little more of the price. 14 months after the humans walked away, the Galactic Council fell, not with a great battle, not with a dramatic last stand. It simply collapsed, piece by piece, like a building with its foundations removed. The weight that had been carried by human shoulders for 47 years finally proved too much for the Council to bear alone. Warlord Kren no longer bothered with raids. He was conquering now. His fleet had grown from 100 ships to over 1,000. As other Morix clans joined his banner, they smelled blood in the water. 2 Torani border worlds fell in the same week. The defenders fought bravely, but they were outmatched. Without human ammunition, their rifles were useless. Without human tactics, their strategies failed. Without human reinforcements, they were alone. The Nuri Trade Consortium declared bankruptcy. Centuries of wealth vanished overnight. Trade Minister Lhasa resigned in disgrace and disappeared. Some said she had fled to non-council space. Others said she had taken her own life. No one knew for certain, and no one had the time to care. The Veth Collective, a peaceful species that had not known war for millennia, faced raiders for the first time in their history. Their agricultural worlds, once the breadbasket of the galaxy, were burning. The irrigation systems had completely failed. The crops had died. Famine was spreading. Elder Orin walked through the empty corridors of Station Prime. Half the lights no longer worked. Maintenance crews had stopped coming weeks ago. The great station, once the symbol of galactic unity, was slowly dying. He passed rooms that had once been filled with diplomats and officials. They were empty now. The delegations had fled home, recalled by governments that no longer believed in the Council's authority. Only a handful of representatives remained. In the Grand Chamber, High Arbiter Vel still sat on his throne. But his eyes were hollow now. His confidence was gone. He stared at nothing, muttering to himself about human ingratitude and treachery. Orin had no sympathy for him. Vel had brought this upon them all. His pride and arrogance had destroyed everything. Finally, Vel made his last, desperate move. He gathered the remaining council members and announced that he would personally lead a delegation to human space. He would demand that they return. He would threaten them with the full might of the council if they refused. What might? Councillor Rix asked bitterly. Our military is scattered. Our economy is destroyed. Our technology is failing. We have nothing left to threaten them with. Then I will appeal to their honor, Vel said. Their precious human morality. They claim to care about innocent lives. I will show them the suffering their silence has caused. I will make them feel guilty. Orin shook his head. You still do not understand. They know exactly what their silence has caused. They chose it anyway, because they knew that anything else would accomplish nothing. You are a coward and a fool, Vel spat. Come with me, or stay behind. I do not care. He flew to the human border with a small fleet of escort ships. The rest of the council watched on the communication screens, waiting to see what would happen. Admiral Minho Kang met him at the border with a single ship. The Eternal Dawn floated in the darkness, her weapons silent, her shields raised. High Arbiter, Minho said calmly. You may not pass. Humanity does not recognize the authority of the Galactic Council. Vel's face twisted with rage. How dare you? I am the High Arbiter of the Galactic Council. I speak for 1,000 worlds. You speak for yourself, Minho replied. Those 1,000 worlds no longer answer to you. Half of them have already applied for independent trade agreements with humanity. The others are too busy fighting the Morax to care what you say. Vel pointed a shaking claw at the Admiral. You are condemning billions to death. Innocent civilians who never voted against you. Children who have done nothing wrong. Is this your precious human morality? Minho was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with old pain. For 47 years, we protected those civilians. We treated their sick. We fed their hungry. We educated their children. We buried our soldiers in their defense. He paused, and your council laughed at us, called us primitive, denied us a voice, refused us a seat at the table we had helped to build. That was politics. That was a choice, Minho interrupted. You made it. Again and again. For 47 years, you made that choice. And now you must live with the consequences. You could save them. Vel screamed. You have the power. You have the knowledge. Why won't you help? Minho looked at him with something that might have been pity. We did help. For half a century, we helped. And you repaid us with contempt. Now you expect us to come running back the moment you whistle? No, High Arbiter. We are not your servants. We are not your tools. We are not your lesser species. His eyes hardened. You built this cage. Now you must live in it. The communication ended. Vel's ship turned around and flew back to Council space. When he returned to Station Prime, everything had changed. A vote had been called in his absence. For the first time in Council history, a High Arbiter was removed from power by force. Guards came for him in the night. They dragged him from his throne, ignoring his screams of protest. He was confined to a cell deep in the station, where he would wait for trial. As they pulled him through the corridors, Vel saw the faces of the remaining delegates. They looked at him with hatred, with disgust, with blame. This is your fault, he screamed at them. You all supported me. You all laughed at the humans. You are just as guilty as I am. No one answered. They simply watched him go. The next morning, Elder Oren stood before the empty council and made an announcement. I will go to the humans, he said. Not as a representative of the council. The council no longer exists in any meaningful way. I will go as an individual. One old fool, with nothing to offer but words. What will you say to them? Someone asked. Oren was quiet for a long moment. The truth. That is all I have left. He took his personal ship and flew to the human border. He came alone, with no weapons, no escort, no demands. Just a single small vessel carrying a single ancient alien. The human patrol intercepted him within hours. They escorted him to Captain Una Park's flagship. She met him in the docking bay personally. She did not smile. She did not offer her hand. She simply stood and waited. Oren stepped off his ship slowly. His body was old and tired. The journey had exhausted him. But his eyes were clear. Captain Park, he said. Thank you for seeing me, Elder Oren. Una nodded. You came alone. Yes. I am not here to negotiate. I am not here to bargain. I am not here to make demands or threats or promises. He sighed deeply. I am here because I owe you something. Something that should have been given long ago. Una raised an eyebrow. And what is that? Oren looked at her. At the calm, steady eyes that had watched so much suffering without breaking. At the straight back that had never bent despite years of insults. At the quiet dignity that had endured 47 years of contempt. An apology, he said. A real one. Not for politics. Not to get something in return. Just, I am sorry. I am so deeply, truly sorry for everything we did to you. Una said nothing. She simply watched him. Will you take me to Earth? Oren asked. I would like to say this to all of them. To your leaders. To your people. To anyone who will listen. For a long moment, there was silence. Then Una turned and began walking toward the interior of the ship. Follow me, she said. We have a long journey ahead. Oren followed her into the ship. Behind him, the docking bay doors closed. And for the first time in 14 months, a door opened. The United Earth Assembly met in the Great Hall in Seoul. It was a simple building compared to the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council. No floating stars, no golden doors, just clean lines and honest stone. Built to last. Elder Oren stood at the speaker's podium. Around him, hundreds of human representatives sat in silent attention. Captain Una Park was there. Admiral Minho Kang, Dr. Hana Cho, Commander Jiho Baek, and Ambassador Taeho Shin, who had not spoken to any alien since the day he walked out of the Grand Chamber. Oren spoke for 3 hours. He did not make excuses. He did not shift blame. He did not ask for forgiveness. He simply told the truth. He described every insult humanity had received, every dismissal, every joke made at their expense. He named the council members who had laughed the loudest. He recounted the votes that had denied humanity a voice, year after year, decade after decade. He spoke of his own cowardice. How he had seen the injustice and said nothing. How he had shaken human hands in private while ignoring their suffering in public. How he had told himself that speaking up would accomplish nothing. That patience was the wiser path. "I was wrong," he said. His voice was hoarse now, weakened by age and exhaustion. "I was wrong, and I knew I was wrong, and I did nothing anyway. That is not wisdom. That is cowardice, and I am ashamed of it." He looked around the hall at the human faces watching him. "I am not here to ask you to save us. The council made its choice, and we must live with the consequences. I am here only to say what should have been said long ago." He bowed his head. "You were right to leave. Your silence was not cruelty. It was dignity. And I am sorry that we forced you to choose between your self-respect and our survival." When he finished, the hall was quiet. No one moved. No one spoke. Then Teho Shin rose from his seat. "Elder Orin," he said. "Why now? Why only when you need us? Where were these words when we could have changed things? Where was this honesty when it might have made a difference?" Orin met his eyes. "It was trapped behind my fear. I was afraid of the other council members. Afraid of losing my position. Afraid of being called a human sympathizer." He smiled bitterly. "Foolish fears. The council is gone now. My position means nothing, and if being a human sympathizer means speaking the truth, then I should have been one all along." Teho was silent for a long moment. Then, he sat down. The assembly voted. It took 2 days. The debate was fierce. Many representatives wanted nothing to do with the council ever again. They had suffered too much. They had lost too many soldiers, too many resources, too many years of dignity. On the second day, Yuna Park asked to speak. She walked to the podium and looked out at her fellow humans. These were the people she had served her entire life. These were the people who had been mocked and dismissed for half a century. They had every right to say no. Every right to let the council burn. "I understand why some of you want to walk away forever," she said. "I have felt that desire myself. Every time they laughed at us. Every time they called us primitive. Every time they refused to see us as equals." She paused. "But I did not become a soldier to take revenge. I became a soldier to protect." She looked toward the windows, where the stars were beginning to appear in the evening sky. "We left because we refused to become like them. We refused to accept contempt as the price of our help. We refused to give our blood to those who saw us as less than people." Her voice hardened. "But if we watch innocents die when we have the power to save them, are we not becoming something even worse? Are we not proving that we are exactly what they always said we were?" She turned back to the assembly. "We are not them. We do not help because we expect gratitude. We do not save lives because we want power. We help because it is right. Because we are human. Because that is who we choose to be." She returned to her seat. The debate continued. In the end, the vote was close. But humanity chose to return, not as members of the council. The council was dead. They returned as independent allies, with terms that could not be negotiated, full recognition of human sovereignty, complete restructuring of galactic governance, reparations for decades of mistreatment, a permanent human seat on the new High Council, with full voting rights and veto power. The other species had no choice but to accept. Human ships crossed the border for the first time in 18 months. They brought medicine for the sick, food for the hungry, weapons for the defenders, engineers for the gates, soldiers for the front lines. The Morax raiders were pushed back within weeks. Warlord Kren fled to the outer territories, his fleet scattered and broken. The gates were repaired, the trade routes reopened. The dying worlds were saved, but nothing was the same. On Station Prime, now partially rebuilt, a ceremony was held. Representatives from 100 species gathered to welcome humanity back into galactic society. This time, there was no laughter, no mockery, no condescension. There was only respect. Counselor Rix found Captain Yuna Park on the observation deck after the ceremony. She stood alone, looking out at the stars. "You could have let us fall," Rick said. "No one would have blamed you. Yuna shook her head. We could have. But that was never who we were. We just needed you to understand something. What? She turned to face him. Our help was a gift. Not an obligation. Not a right. A gift. Freely given, because we chose to give it. Her eyes were calm but serious. Gifts must be earned. And they can be taken away. Rix nodded slowly. I think we understand now. I hope so. Yuna looked back at the stars. Because there will not be a third chance. On Earth, Tiho Shin watched the news feeds in his apartment. He saw human ships flying alongside council ships. He saw human doctors treating alien patients. He saw human soldiers shaking hands with former enemies. He did not feel triumphant. He felt tired, and old, and strangely sad. His communication device beeped. A message from Elder Orin. Thank you, it said. For everything. I know it was not enough. But thank you. Teho read the message 3 times. Then he typed a response. It was not about thanks. It was never about thanks. It was about being seen, being heard, being treated as equals. He paused, then continued typing. Remember this, Elder. The next time someone asks for your respect and you are tempted to refuse, remember how much it cost you. Remember how close you came to losing everything. He sent the message and turned off his device. A year later, a monument was built on Station Prime. It stood in the central plaza, where all could see it. It was simple. A single column of white stone, polished to a mirror finish. On its surface was carved a single human handprint, life-sized. Beneath it, in every language of the galaxy, were the same words. They asked only for respect. Remember, visitors would come from across the stars to see it. They would stand before it in silence, reading those words, thinking about what they meant, and sometimes, if they listened carefully, they could almost hear the echo of footsteps. The quiet, dignified sound of the humans walking away in utter silence, and making the galaxy understand, at last, the true price of contempt, the end.